Hey there, Workforce. Chris here with Work to Game, and I am once again here with my brother Todd, and today we're going to talk a little bit about victory points. Now, we play mostly ITC missions. That's kind of where we found that it balances really well with the armies we play. It adds a lot of variety, and it seems to kind of expand on the system to be a little better balanced towards like objectives, but also respect kills, and allows for these things called secondary objectives beyond the rule book. And so we just go grab the ITC rules, and as we ever get to the point to start going to tournaments, we'll probably be going to ITC tournaments because that's what's hosted our areas. Those are just all the little independent ones at shops, and they're part of one big kind of league if you want to follow that. So what I wanted to talk to you is we played a couple games, ITC games, and one of the things that we've spent a lot of time talking through over the last year as we've gotten more and more into this hobby is helping each other make sure we understand our secondaries. That does a couple of things. So first of all, how much time do you spend thinking about victory points versus killing when you're building a list?
So when I'm, honestly, as an orc player, my lists don't revolve too much about thinking about victory points or killing, to be honest, because whether I'm either going to get into melee range or not when my orcs have, currently without a codex, orcs have kind of very few strategies. It's either you put all your boys as Choppa Sluggers and you just run in and hope for the best, maybe to jump one group as close as possible and have a hope that you, to the, you know, or dice gods Gork and Mork, that you get a 9 to make that charge in, or that you run like a concentrated fire list where you put everything in shooting, which orcs get a ton of shots, they just can't hit anything, and hope that you can take down those units one at a time. It's kind of difficult. Mostly it's how I think about how I'm going to play the lists rather than build the list, because building the list is not... Currently, as the orcs are, I don't see much variety, just how things are pointed out. That can totally change when the codex comes out. So,
if you're not building a list with victory points in mind because your army, that's not easy for, or something like that, because the armies are all played very differently. And so one of the things about ITC specifically is you have primary objectives and secondary objectives. Primary objectives are, you know, securing different objective points. Sometimes there's like a bonus thing if you control a certain number, etc. But secondaries is where you get to pick from a list. And so this is actually what I was more excited to talk to you about, is because there's kind of two sides to this coin. One is you look at their list and you have to pick the right secondaries. And we kind of talk through that with each other right now, but as we get more competitive and as we get better at it, that will get removed, because if you make a mistake, I'm willing to let you lose for that. Right now, we want good games. And so it's in our best interest to say, hey, you forgot to roll your feel no pain. Hey, because I want to know if my stuff can kill your stuff. And if you're not playing by all your rules, that doesn't tell me. And so we're trying to help each other. And then over time, we'll start to, okay, I reminded him on turn 1. I'm not going to remind him again. And if he forgets all his other feel no pains, that's not my problem. Or I let you miss one charge this weekend, and it made a huge difference because as he was moving forward, there was a terrain piece and he wasn't able to move a guy the full movement, and then he lined up all of his other guys with that first guy, which shorted him an inch. And then he missed the charge by 1 inch. And then my melee guys got the charge and wiped his entire squad out in 1 hit. Because Berserkers versus boys, it's whoever swings first. And so that side of that field went in my advantage that game. So we're starting to take the training wheels off. But as we talk about secondary objectives, one of the things in the big change I made to my list between our first game and our secondary game was you and I talked about how do I deny you victory points. So kind of talk a little bit about when do you focus on denial versus balancing your list, and when do you focus on what you know you can get from me?
Well, so again, orcs, with the way that the ITC missions are set up, orcs kind of don't have many choices as far as denying other people points, because you have to take
Reaper's a shoe-in because
they
he has
have
to take...
a secondary called Reaper, and it's you get 2 points for killing a unit that starts with 20 or more models. Right?
You get points for having a lot of models. Yeah. And then get up to 4 from each secondary, and he brings so many squads, that's easy.
Yeah, they also have a Headhunter one, which is getting a point for killing a character.
And your list has a ton of characters.
It has 9 characters, and that's honestly not a lot for orcs.
So would you think about ever removing those characters to try to remove the possibility for me to get those points?
See, for me, it's a force multiplier, and if I don't have all of those characters, my boys don't work. Like, if I put more models on the table, it's not enough because I can't get all of those models into combat. So at some point, there's like a critical mass of models that I have to have, that I've hit. And once I hit those models, all of my other points need to either be supporting them in ranged fire or supporting them with auras, like the Knob with the Wah Banner, who gives them +1 to hit. Gazkul, who gives them advance and charge, who gives them +1 attack on the charge. The Weird Boy, who can either jump them, so he redeploys them anywhere outside of 9 inches of an enemy unit.
It's like a mid-game deep strike.
Yeah. Or Warpath gives them +1 to their attacks characteristics until the next psychic phase. So it's 2 fight phases, by the way, which is
extra attacks. So he's got these characters that each perform a very specific task, and that task is more instrumental to his army than the 1 victory point I'm going to get for wiping it off the table. The other advantage is kind of like what we were talking about with having more drops. From any secondary objective in ITC, you can only score 4 points from it. So if each character of his is worth 1 point, having 3 or less makes me want to consider not taking Headhunter as one of my 3 secondaries. Having 4 or more makes me want to take it. Having 4 or 5, if he can keep 1 hidden, he can actually screw me out of a victory point that I thought I was going to get. But as soon as he starts hitting 6, 7, I'm going to get all 4. He knows I'm going to get all 4, at least 3.
It's just a matter of time.
The difference between 7 and 9 is nothing on my points. So what does he get for it? So victory points wise, you get a lot for it. That Wah Banner that you picked up in your second game that you didn't have in your first game made a huge difference.
I did double the wounds with that unit almost.
And so that was worth it.
The math shouldn't have worked out to that because it's just +1 to hit. But it really...
Because of his strength versus the toughness of the guys I was bringing.
It was also the +2 extra attacks probably as well. But again, that's 3 different aura effects from 3 different characters.
Right.
And then defensively, there's the Pain Boy, and then there's the Big Mech.
And the Pain Boy really gives him a lot of staying power for me because boys are one of those units in the game that doesn't have a whole lot of armor. And so that means that the fact that I have any weapons with any armor pierce means that I immediately slaughter them. And so if he can add a Feel No Pain to that, then when I start dealing mortal wounds from a caster or I start doing AP weapons on them in bulk, he still gets a chance to save some number of those. And so when looking at secondaries, you want to somewhat focus on, well, what's going to bring you down? Because you want the opponent to have to make choices. So I had a ton of squads of 10 or more berserkers, and I had some squads of 20 or more cultists. And so in the first game, I made Reaper really easy for him. In my second game, I dropped those cultists down to squads of 19, and I dropped my berserkers down to squads of 8. And that Reaper suddenly was just hard for him to come by because he would have to kill all 3 of my cultist squads to pick up 3 points. He can't cap it. And if he's killing my cultists, some of them are in my backfield just to keep him from jumping. So he is literally in my backfield with probably boys, which means I'm getting tabled. So at that point, he's won regardless of the secondary. So it forces him to move on. So if your list can still work, right, when you're just trimming 1 or 2 models, then it just becomes a question of, does it still work? 12 berserkers obviously puts out a lot of hits, but does 8 put out enough? Does 9 put out enough? Because if it does, I can trim secondaries, and then I actually brought more squads and not enough squads that he could do what's called death by 1,000 cuts, where it's a lot of
the next one is I have to kill 3 squads per turn.
Right.
And so if I don't kill at least 3 squads in one turn, I don't get any points, and it just takes away the total number of squads I have available to kill.
So
that one...
When thinking about a list, you think about a couple of things. You think about how it's going to kill. You think about how it's going to move around the table to secure objectives. You think about how they're going to work with each other. And that all comes into knowing ahead of time, what is your deployment plan, right? If there's 2 lanes of fire, how do you split your long-range firepower across that? If there's if there's melee units, where are you going to put those? Do they run in one group or 2? So that when you see a deployment map, you can immediately put the puzzle pieces into place. But you also want to, as you want to build that list, you want to think about, if I had to beat my own list, how would I do it? How would I score victory points against me for primaries? If there's a secondary objective, which ones would I go for? And so you can already know, well, if he has armor-pierce weapons, this is what they're going to hit of mine. And so you can already begin looking at things like screens. You can begin looking at keeping them out of line of sight. You can begin at forcing them to make decisions, forcing them to move, forcing them to do things that they don't want to do. I want his boys to have to kill my cultists because it's a waste of boys. Yeah. That way, my berserkers get to hit the boys before they hit them, because whoever swings first wins. That's what I want against him. Against my brother Adam, he's not gonna melee me. So it's, if anything in the way of the berserkers is a problem, and the cultists have a different job. I'm probably using my stratagem to put them in his backfield and shoot at him from behind in rapid fire range, while objective securing his objectives, because he doesn't bring that many troop choices. So objective secured is really powerful against him.
Yeah, all of a sudden 19 cultists, I mean, he has to bring 3 squads of his fire warriors over to even contest the point, and that's not counterattacking.
And I know that that's a melee army with a lot of models versus a shooting army with not very many models. And so as I build my list, you don't want to list tailor, because then you can't take it to a shop and play a stranger. So as I decide the number of boys or the number of berserkers in a squad, I need to think, well, how's that going to do against Todd, and how's that going to do against Adam? And between the 2 of them, that generally gives me a pretty good feel of how it's going to hit anything between, because they are on 2 extremes.
Yeah, I mean, then really, I think the only other list would be an elite army.
Sure.
So I guess usually, I guess, a Space Marine army with a lot of specific units like Hellblasters and things like that.
Small model.
Death Ball, kind of, maybe 2 Death Ball, and that's like their whole army kind of things where...
And so what is your army weak against? And how, if you were weak against that, how are you defending the number of victory points you give up? And how are you securing as many as you can? Because I have won games on points when I have been handedly beaten on kill points, because the game was objective based. So I bring a 2,000 point list, 12, 13, 1,400 of it gets wiped off the table. I only wipe off 600 or 700 points of his, and I still win because I am handedly ahead in the points.
Yeah. Now, there's actually something else to consider with playing ITC missions. So what he's talking about is winning even though his army is getting destroyed. Well, this can only really happen in a progressively scoring game. Because if you look at any of the missions from the original big rule book, it's like all the points score at the end. The only flex points are going to be like first strike. So basically an 8th, whoever goes first generally kills a unit first. There's some exceptions, but most of the time you can count on losing it if you lose first turn.
Right.
And then they also have Line Breaker, which is only at the end of the game. And then they have Slay the Warlord. So
which you can both get.
Yeah, you can both get both of those.
So that can go neutral.
And so if all the points score at the end of the game, and you don't get points for killing things every round, and you don't get these progressive points, it tends to be very skewed. Like one person tends to win, like if all the objectives are worth 3, they tend to win like 13 to 2.
Which is why we play ITC.
It's because he got Linebreaker and Warlord, and the other guy got everything else.
Because the game where he handedly beat me out of the gate, he beat me 32 to 19. Those are losing. He handedly beat me, almost wiped me off the table. It was my first time to see his list in action. It was my first time to try a heavy berserker army. It was a lot of firsts, and I just guessed, and he just guessed, and he handedly wiped me. And that's okay. We both, afterwards, he made tweaks, I made tweaks. We both learned a lot, and we had a ton of fun, and we laughed a lot. It was a really slow game.
Oh, it
took us like the whole day, it felt like. And so I think, you know, you can play to learn. You don't have to always play to win, and play to have fun. And so, but I still picked up 19 points. And that was all in kind of those first couple turns.
Yeah, and by the end of turn 2, he was up
way ahead.
By 10 points or something.
Which,
like,
in ITC tournaments, there's usually a time limit. So if that game had ended at the end of turn 2 or the end of turn 3, I would have won. Yeah. Because I scored 15 of my 19 points in the first 2 turns. Yeah. And then I really just got stopped. And he had 4 points on the board. He scored everything at the end when he started mopping things up. So,
and all of my some of my objectives were again like a 1 point per turn thing.
Right.
And I had to complete all 6 turns because it's another thing. ITC is always 6 turns for the total game, and so I had to complete all 6 turns to even get that one.
Right. So, long story short, what we're saying is victory points play a role all the way from the time you design your list through even as you feel like you're losing. Yep. Keeping the points in mind is incredibly important on both the points you're going to get and the points that you're intentionally going to give up, right? I'm intentionally going to give up Headhunter as an orc player because I'm going to be able to pick up all these other things by having these powerhouse boys. So that is really kind of something you want to keep in mind and something that you want to play with and learn to kind of work on, right? It taught me a lot about, okay, I needed to deny him a lot of points for that second game. So I made huge sweeping adjustments because there was no way I could make an adjustment where I was going to jump from 19 to 32 points gained. So the first step was, I've got to get his score way lower.
Yep.
You know, so that was a big piece of my list design, was not only how do I pick up more points, but how do I design a list that doesn't give up so many points in the second half of the game when things start dying. And that was make it to where a lot of my stuff dies without giving them a point. It gives him 1 point for the turn for killing something, but it doesn't give a bonus kill point for being a squad larger than a certain size. So anyway, this subject's gone really long. Let us know what you guys think. Let us know kind of as you think about building a list, what are things you think about besides just what shoots the fastest? How do you have enough variety of weapon profiles? How do you make sure it's the right number of points? What do you own? All these basic questions. How do you start getting into more advanced things where you think about the task and the deployment of a model and what it's going to do for you? You know, any kind of tips and tricks you can have in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. This is once again my brother Todd in his lovely living room. And thanks so much for coming on. And I will see you guys next.
Hey Chris, I really like what you do on this channel and I want to say thanks. How can I do that?
You know, you could try being a patron.
Oh, okay. So tell me more about it.
Well, I think you'd have to click on the link to take you to our Patreon page and see if you want to support it. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to support just me. Okay. You're going to have to support both of us.
So this is kind of like a win-win. So if they support you, they support me, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Do we get? Do we have like cool, fun rewards? Like, is there anything I get?
They do, and we're constantly looking for ways to change that. So if you support Team Brian, Team Chris, just teamwork to game, click on that link.
Yeah. Let us know what you think about the rewards too, whether you like them or if we could do something a little bit different.
And by the way, thanks for watching this video.
We really appreciate it.
We'll see you next time.
Take care.